So the previous video was all about structural entry barriers and what they are and how they affect the attractiveness of entry. This one is going to be about strategic entry barriers. So let's first have a look at what they actually are and then see how they work economically. So remember, entry barriers are factors that allow incumbent firms to earn positive economic profit. So it's something good to have an entry barrier if you are an incumbent, while making it unprofitable for newcomers to enter the industry. So entrants, newcomers, will not want to enter a market with high entry barriers. And leaving aside the structural entry barriers, which are basically entry barriers that are somehow part of the nature of the industry, let's now focus on strategic entry barriers. Strategic entry barriers are the result of conscious strategic actions, aggressive strategic actions by the incumbent, intended to keep the entrant out of the industry. So, why would one do this, and what could that be? Well, an incumbent typically, when trying to deter entry, takes some costly action, right? This could mean over-investing in advertising or in branding, or making offers, making favorable long-term contracts, offering long-term contracts to to consumers, and these consumers will then find it hard to sign up with an entrant. So these are all entry deterring actions. Why are they? Because they will make it more difficult, they will make it less attractive for an entrant to come into a market. Why would an incumbent do this? He would only do this if two conditions are met. The first one is that the incumbent earns higher profits despite deterring by staying a monopolist rather than a duopolist, which lets another player come into the market. The second condition is that this entry deterring strategy changes the entrant's expectations about the nature of post-entry competition. So in other words, entry deterrence has to be profitable, and it has to be successful in keeping the other player out of the market. So now assume that we have some kind of behavior. Let's say signing consumers up on long-term contracts. Let's say over-investing in capacity or in a brand or something along those lines. What does that do economically? How does that play out? And when should we deter entry? So let's say without any threat of entry, without anything happening, we make a level of profits that's up here. So these are my monopoly profits. After period 1, after T1, there could be entry. Maybe because a patent is running out. Maybe because a license comes up for sale. Maybe because technology develops in a way such that from T2 onwards, another player can come into the market. So I now have two things I could do. I have two options. The first one is to block entry. So that means I over-invest in capacity. I sign up people on long-term contracts. I over-invest in marketing. Okay? This means I engage in some costly strategic action that lowers my profits compared to monopoly profits, but it's successful in keeping the entrant out. The other option is to accommodate entry, in which case I don't change anything about my behavior in period 1, and then after period 2, I just accept that someone's going to come into my market. So the level of profit is going to be high early on, and then it drops because I become a duopolist. I have a second player in the market, I have a competitor in the market. So there's two things we can think about. One thing is that the difference between monopoly profits and the profits from blocking entry is simply the cost of deterring entry. The second is the difference between monopoly profits and the profits when accommodating entry is the cost of losing market share, right? So both things are costly. The difference is here that blocking entry comes straight away and accommodating entry comes only after the entrant enters the market. So when should we deter and when should we accommodate? Well, if we think about it this way, or if we think about using this graph, very stylized one of course, but thinking about it using this graph, we simply have to compare the net present value of these two options. Let's think of the net present value of accommodating entry. So early on, we make high profits. And then after the entrant comes in, we make lower profits. Okay, so the net present value, we have to discount profits, payoffs that we get in the future, but this is basically the area of profits for accommodating entry. Let's now have a look at the profits from blocking entry, the net present value from blocking entry. So here, I make profits that are here all the time. So that means that the net present value is going to be all this level of profits, all these profits. So what you can see here is basically two regimes, two parts. Over here, it seems more attractive to accommodate entry because you're not changing your behavior, right? This is the cost of deterring entry. On the other hand, over here, it's attractive to have blocked entry because there's a cost to losing market share, as we've seen just now. So depending on how highly you value the future, you're going to want to accommodate entry if your focus is on the present, or you would want to block entry if your focus is on the future. So now we know how to choose a market. It depends on Porter's 5 forces, the attractiveness of a market, and it depends on the degree of entry barriers that there is in the market. The next step now is going to be to figure out what the best way to enter a market is. And this is what we'll discuss in the next videos. So thanks very much and stay tuned.